Chala, very welcome. Ahmad Mukhtar, welcome. Please continue to introduce yourself in the chat room. We are going to start in the next 2 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, you're most welcome. We are starting our webinar. For participants that have just joined us, introduce yourself in the chat feature. Type your name there, your affiliation and country, so that we can get to know who is present. I have introduced the Nile Basin Development Forum. It is a science policy dialogue and helps us to exchange knowledge and share best practices, but also influence the direction of development in the cooperation of the Nile Basin. And this is the 6th edition of the Nile Basin Development Forum, and it is being hosted by the Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. Because of COVID, we are having the NBDF in the form of webinars, except for the very final one where we shall have a hybrid of a small meeting in Ethiopia with other participants in the basin joining virtually. We were expecting to have some introductory remarks from the TAC member from Uganda, Dr. Kalis Tindimugaya. But because of parallel other activities in the water sector in Uganda they're having the Water and Environment Week, and it's a very busy week of similar discussions like this one. He was unable to join us, but he wishes us well. So in his absence, I'll make a few comments before then inviting our distinguished panelists to give us presentations. So our topic is on watershed management. I want to start with a small definition of what is meant by a watershed. A watershed is a natural delineation of a unit of land draining into a common outlet along a stream channel. And on the right side of the screen, you see an artist's depiction of a watershed. Commonly, we use that term for relatively smaller units of land that are often local in geographical extent, but they can also be transboundary. So we can talk of the entire watershed of the Nile Basin, but typically among water resources management people, watersheds are smaller drainage basins. Watersheds face a range of degradation challenges, and we shall be hearing about that in the presentation we shall receive. The way that the watershed is managed has profound cascading effects on flow of water, flow of sediments and pollutants, flow of goods and services, and flow of employment and jobs across the basin and across international boundaries. So the watershed helps us to ensure that our rivers can continue to flow. In the picture on the right, you see rainfall in the headwaters regions, and then small rivers draining the land and eventually merging to form a bigger river that flows downstream. But you also see a lot of development in the watershed. There are human settlements, there are agricultural lands, there's a power station. So the way we manage our watershed has an effect on those benefits that we can derive from the common shared resources. That is why it is important in the transboundary context that we also look at issues of watershed management. Next slide. Plant degradation depends on many factors, as we shall hear in the presentations. But these include topography, geology, soil characteristics, land cover, land use practices, climate, watershed size. Within the Nile Basin, on the right, those two circles are showing the areas that are most prone to degradation because of the characteristics they have, the topographic features and the amount of erosion they have, plus also human pressure on those natural resources. So the hotspots are in the headwater regions of the Nile, and our presentations are taken from those regions. Next, please. The presentations will try to highlight the challenges with respect to watershed management, but they will not stop at lamenting about the problem. They'll also showcase what different countries in the Nile Basin are doing to be able to cope with this challenge and ensure the sustainable flow of water in the Nile. As well as presentations from the countries, we shall have one presentation from the subsidiary action programs, specifically NELSAP, also highlighting what NBI is doing through its subsidiary action programs in terms of trying to address this challenge of watershed management. Finally, to conclude our webinar, we will have a panel discussion where we'll brainstorm. We'll have the panelists leading us on brainstorming on this topic of watershed management. So briefly, that is what we shall be going through, and that's what we have for you today. Our presenters for this afternoon are Professor Gete Zeleke. He will be telling us about sustainable land management, the case of Ethiopia, and then we'll have a similar presentation by Mr. Vincent Dipol Kabalisa, who will be sharing with us what Rwanda is doing in the area of watershed management. And we also have our colleague from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and who will be also presenting. That is also another hotspot area with the type of terrain there. You'll be also sharing challenges from that side of the Nile Basin. Then we have, like I've mentioned, the presentation from NELSAP before the panel discussions. Thank you. Let me now, without any further ado, invite Professor Gete Zeleke from Ethiopia. Kindly put on your mic and your camera, introduce yourself, share your screen, and make your presentation. The floor is yours. Professor, are you with us?
You hear us? You hear me?
Yes, we hear you. The floor is yours.
Okay, thanks. Hi, you hear me, guys?
Yes, we hear you. We see your presentation and it is in full mode. Please go ahead.
I was asked to make a short presentation about the experience of
Professor, your internet is a bit weak. Simply turn off your video and then continue the slide because we're seeing the slides. Professor, can you proceed with your presentation? Can I ask the next presenter? That is Mr. Vincent Paul Kabalisa. While we allow the professor to come on, Mr. Kabalisa, can you proceed to share your screen and make your presentation? Welcome, sir.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Nicholas. Let me share now my presentation. So, do you see?
maybe shall I try later? I have problem with my internet.
Yes, we'll give you the opportunity later on. Let Mr. Kabalisa go ahead, then we'll invite you back. We see your screen, put it in full mode. Good. Go ahead, sir. Mr. Kabalisa.
Yes, yes, thank you, Doctor. So, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Proceed.
Okay, thank you. So, watershed management experience of Rwanda with land husbandry techniques. Thank you very much, Dr. Nicholas, for giving me the opportunity. As you can see, this is the image which shows some of the landscape of our country. You can see really how steep we are our landscape. So this is one of the challenge in terms of physical challenge. But as I take you through the presentation, you will see some of the techniques we are using to address this issue of soil loss and also how we are protecting the hills to make sure we have clean water. So as outline, I will give you some few facts, and then I will talk about what we call land husbandry. We'll give you quite a good definition of what is really land husbandry. Then in terms of policy and strategic plan, how we are dealing with it. Then the challenge we are facing in terms of erosion, the soil loss, the nutrients, the issues we are facing in terms of water. Then, of course, we are not only talking about the challenge, but also the solution we are addressing in terms of the challenge we are having vis-a-vis the soil loss. So we'll go to land husbandry approach, then the technology, and then some lesson learned. So without losing time, our country, as you can see, is already on top of the Nile Basin. I hope you can see my pointer. It is really one of the source of the Great White Nile. You know, there are many countries which keep saying they are the source of the Nile, but also including Burundi, Rwanda, and Uganda, we are all the source of the Nile, even Tanzania. So we are really the Nile, Great Nile is coming from these countries upstream of the Lake Victoria. So we are depending largely on agriculture, employs more than 69% of our workforce. The sector accounts for approximately 30% of the GDP, according to the national accounts. And as our agriculture is on the steep slopes, and most of the activities, the feeder roads, the processing units, all they are on those slopes, and they have a certain impact on erosion, which comes as landslide. Our overall water availability per capita is 170 cubic meter per person per year, and which remains low, and we are doing our efforts to make sure we really increase the water availability per capita. So we are also facing some challenges related to climate change. Climate change is contributing increasingly, and we're having a short and more intense rainy seasons, which brings a lot of flooding in some of these steep slopes, and drought also in some lowland. Population is quite high, density, one of the highest density in Africa. And that the high density of population coupled with the increasing urbanization, economic development is affecting also the land, the land in the water in general. So what is land husbandry? Land, as you can see, land husbandry is terminology for soil and water conservation, defined as treatment of land policy. Land is based on motives of care. There is this kind of terminology of husbandry. The husbandry approach, as you can see, really is looking at how we can take care of, the husband is taking care of the wife, but now we are taking care of the land seriously, and looking at how we can take care of the land and the water. So it includes all technologies that are effective for optimizing and sustainably maintaining soil plant water relationships for greater yield from plants in watershed setting. So in Rwanda, we are looking at that approach of taking seriously the soil and the plant water relationships, and see how we can maximize, optimize, and sustainably maintain them, and ensure that there is a greater yield from the plants in the watershed setting, as Dr. Nicholas was presenting. So the land husbandry approach was tested in a formal way from 2008 with support from one of the colleagues from Ethiopia, Dr. Azene, which I have to recognize, and he was really coming up with the testing, the technology, or what they used to be, but this was in a formal way, and I was part of the testing also. I was in charge of information framework, and so I was really pleased to share with you some of these techniques, and as you can see. So now the land husbandry has been a priority in our strategic plan for agriculture transformation for Rwanda, which is looking at how we can transform our agriculture from a subsistence sector to a knowledge-based value-creating sector. And it's one of the priority which is being implemented throughout the country. It has been adopted, implemented by all concerned institutions which are dealing with sustainable land and water management, including Rwanda Agriculture Board, Ministry of Environment, Rwanda Environment Management Authority, the Fund for Environment for Rwanda, the Green Fund for Environment for Rwanda, which is called FONERWA, the Rwanda Water Board, the Water Resource Board, the district also, which are implementing agencies for issues related to soil and water conservation, Ministry of Local Government, various NGOs in private sectors, all have been adopting this approach in terms of when they are dealing with the soil and water conservation. So the challenge we're facing in terms of the soil, actually our soil are acidic. They have low pH, which hinders the phosphorus availability to plant. The soil, our soils which are acidic also, they are causing excess aluminum deposition that fix the phosphorus and often causing aluminum toxicity. So this is one of the challenges most of the soil are facing, and there are techniques to reduce the acidity, and but it's one of the challenges that our soil are facing. So the major conservation and productivity role players, the organic carbon and the nitrogen are exhausted from the topsoil. This is because of the steep slopes, and this affects the soil, and the topsoil is often exhausted. Even the other challenge, the moisture holding capacity is also inhibited, and deep water percolation and nutrient leaching cause lack of plant nutrients and moisture at the root zone. So most of the root zones, of course, for the plants, they are being affected with lack of this holding capacity with the moisture. So the challenge is to see how really to maintain the moisture at for the root zone of the plants. So this is the map of the country. As you can see, there are these, just a little bit of geography, there are these reddish color, which is really the separation of the two catchments. One catchment brings water to the Nile, the biggest area. Then there is another catchment which brings the water to the Congo Basin. And this separation is where there is where there are more risks of erosion. It's quite high altitude area, quite moisture with a rate of rainfall, and with steep slopes, long slopes. So this is where the high risk of erosion are affecting mostly. And you will see the techniques based on this kind of zones, the high risk, the high zone, moist, a little bit moisture here, and dry zone area. And the techniques are varying according to this categorization. As I said, the wet zones, we're talking about between 1,400 millimeter per year. There are a lot of floods, siltation, and landslide, which threaten the very existence of social and the biophysical environment. We're experiencing a lot of flood in the landslide area. Then the moist zone between 900 and 1,400 millimeter, where we have water enough during rainy season and continued percolation supply and the livelihood at risk. Then finally, below 900 millimeter, we call it agroeconomic zone in dry zone, limited production. We're facing a lot of drought, sometimes migration and unstable really agriculture in those areas. So this you can see a nice picture of landscape in this high moisture zone. Here you can see from this was from helicopter, one of the occasion where we saw a lot of landslide and a lot of erosion. And you can see some of these plants, banana plants, forests, and how they are washed away from the soil. And you can see, really, you can imagine, and you see how the slopes and how people are being affected with the soil which is being lost. This gives a really good picture of the landscape in general, and it gives you an idea of how the land cover is, with a lot of banana, a lot of forestry here, some houses here and there, scattered houses, but with this high risk of soil which is being lost. So in those areas which are quite full of water, moisture area, what the techniques which are proposed are modified degraded terrace that are connected to what we call cut-off drains, which are connected to waterways, which finally end up in storage reservoir. So you can see some of these we call cut-off drains, just to make sure the water is cutted from the slope and is drained in the waterways, is taken towards water storage. And the terrace, which are modified terrace, are kind of graded along the contour and graded towards upslope to drainage canal that lead to cut-off drain. And these are very, very important techniques to make sure you channel the water, you cut it from the slopes, and you convey it to a waterways, which later on we also convey it to a water storage for it to be used or reused or be used also as recharge to the groundwater. And you can see some of the groundwater, water storage down here, which are facilitating using the gray infrastructure and which are storing the water from the hills. Of course, the graded terrace are constructed together with some agroforestry trees to make sure not only there is a modification of the slope, but also we include also some of these trees to sustain the soil, to make sure the soil is stable. In lowland, in a little bit of this lowland area, there are construction of level terrace, which are interspaced by cut-off drain, of course. Then that convey excess water during rainy season, if in case of rainy season, in case of excess water, and together with waterways, which end up into a valley dam reservoir, the same also as moisture zone for use in dry season. Actually, we in those areas, not very different really from the master zone area, we include the terrace, and also we together with the cutoff drain and waterways. And this is one of the way to really to retaining and in case of excess water, and to make sure the excess water is disposed by cutoff drain to recharge facilities. And you can see the how the level of terrace are carved out from the hillside. These are treated, of course, again with compost and lime, and to address that issue for acidity, to reduce the acidity, toxicity, for improve the water absorption and retention. As I said earlier, the challenge in terms of what we face in terms of the soil is that toxicity, that acidity. So we must make sure we also put compost and lime. So in lowland area, construction of water retaining land management measures such as level structure, which with tie ridge treated with compost and as needed plus supplementary irrigation from external water source. So you can see, I hope you can see well, some of these water retaining land management measures, level structured with tie ridge treated with compost and as needed plus supplementary irrigation for external water source. So this is one of the, again, landscape of the country. The challenge, as I said there, are related to these slopes. You can see, unless really, unless you have to make sure in most of our area, unless you need to make sure you cut the slope, you make the terrace ever more graded or a bench terrace. Otherwise, it's very not easy to do the agriculture. So these are the way it used to be before the land was treated. So just to continue, on all those terraces, we are putting what we call grass strips on between 0 and 6% of slopes. The technology which is proposed from the land husbandry is to make sure there are grass strips. They are planted along the contour on cultivated land to reduce the amount of water flowing across the slope, and they are meant to make sure to bar the soil which is being transported along water. And actually they are planted with perennial grasses and protected from grazing, and to build up slowly those grass strips build up as into terrace. So these are some of the techniques, and from the photo you can see this grass. If you visit our country, you will see in most of the landscape this kind of grass, which are put here, and which slowly becomes really like a terrace. And these have a big role to play. They stop the soil moving upstream to downstream. They are retained here, and gradually they even build up, becoming a terrace, a complete terrace in the flat area. So they become progressive terrace. They are usually together with agroforestry trees, grevillea, and other trees, which are proposed by the Ministry of Agriculture. They are used to, in terms of, they are recommended to be together with agroforestry trees, fruit trees, all these kind of trees which help to the farmer to get more income. And if possible, also where possible, there is this kind of afforestation. Then on our area, which between 6, I don't know if you can see well. I need to just to make sure I see well. But there are between, let me see for the above the between 6 and 16% slope. There are what we call elf-stone bands. The bands are embankment on ridges built across slope along the contour. They also prevent water in the eroded soil from moving down the slope. Usually, the embankment is between around 70 centimeter high on the upslope side, and height of minimum of 52 centimeter. So actually, you can see better from these figures with this kind of bounds on ever stable soil or unstable soil. which are proposed here. There are also some measurements. There are specifications on this kind of bands, but the idea is to understand that they are like embankment or ridges.
Mr. Kabalisa,
Yes.
go back to full screen and try to move faster. You have another 5 minutes.
Yes, I understand. Yeah. So these are kind of terrace. This is between 16 and 40% slope, and because of the high slope, we propose to make bench terrace, which is a very small terrace, which you can see from the photo, which are really small terrace, just to make sure the slope is cutted, and then we can have really a kind of structure which are able to hold the moisture, nutrient, and seed as intended. So this is a photo of this structure which are put between 40 to 60%. So these are some examples of the products which are coming from the terracing. The lands producing Irish potatoes 10 times after terracing, and the water retaining treatments are implemented in moisture zone. And in dry area, you can see also some good produce from the agriculture. And in terms of, it's not only we are facing the challenge of soil, but gullies. How do we treat the gullies? We are putting the check dams, and you can see these check dams, which are very, very useful in terms of retaining the soil, and which help to address the issues of gullies. So these are one of the examples of the way we are putting the cutoff drain and the grass, waterway, and check dams. So on the other ways, we are also promoting the tea plantation in some of these soil which are acidic. The tea is playing a big role, and is also giving a lot of income, and also is benefiting on the soil which are very acidic, and some of the areas really they are planted with tea. And the rangeland also, you can see some of the rangeland on those hills, and also river banks. You can see the vegetation, the agroforestry trees on some of these river banks. Down there is a river here, which are protecting the river banks from the soil erosion on the river. So in terms of benefit impacts, some of these techniques have seriously improved the productivity. The largest, when the treatment household harvest able to produce 60% more than the comparison group. And access to, of course, the land husbandry has not been done, not only with looking at the agriculture production, but also looking at the access to bank savings. We saw a lot of improvement in terms of saving. We saw a lot of improvement in terms of food security, improved ecosystem service, large adoption of those techniques by all institutions. So there was a lot of benefits. So in conclusion, really, at every challenge, there is a solution. The most important is to use the human ingenuity. We are offering, as Rwanda, some of the best practices in terms of managing land and water in Africa and the Nile Basin, and we are happy to share with you. We need to increase cooperation, and I thank NBI, really Nile Basin Initiative, to allow us to make sure we share our lesson, because this can also be replicated in other countries. And I'm sure with win-win cooperation, we will keep flowing, our water will keep flowing. What we are looking is to make sure our Nile water flows, and we'll be able to share cost and benefit for economic and environmental social development for our people. I wish to thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kabalisa. Participants, like I've said, this is a forum for exchanging ideas, knowledge, best practices. And I think we have got quite a lot from Mr. Kabalisa to know all those technologies that are present and are being applied here in our neighborhood. It is something we can learn from each other. I think Professor Gete is now back. Professor Gete, can I invite you to share your screen and make your presentation? And if you have challenges, we have the option to run your presentation from this side while you talk from your side. But let's first have the first option that you share your screen.
Let me try. My internet went out. One moment, please.
Participants, as the presentations are ongoing, please add your name and affiliation in the chat, but also you can share ideas in the chat and also ask questions in the Q&A feature. Professor, the floor is yours. We see your presentation. Put it in full mode.
Yeah, I hope the internet will continue. So, my apology, we have a problem of land degradation, but we have also problem of internet connection in Ethiopia. These are the contents of my presentation, as you can see it. I'll discuss more about land degradation, causes and impacts, and then experiences in Ethiopia, and some lessons and concluding remark, particularly how the Nile Basin Initiative could support integrated watershed management in the basin in general. As part of my introduction, I think when we see water as ecosystem services, the Ethiopian highlands, as you can see on the picture, covers only about 32% of the Nile Basin, but provides nearly 86% of the total runoff and uses less than 1%. I think it's very important to underline. And on the right side, what you see is the picture showing the Nile Basin part of Ethiopia, and we call it Upper Eastern Nile. But this important ecosystem, which provides 86% of the Nile flow downstream, is extremely affected by land degradation. And to show you some of the land degradation features, there are, about 80% of the total population. We are about 100 million plus, is dependent on subsistence agriculture. So the immediate impact of land degradation actually affects agricultural productivity, and the annual average is up to 2 to 3%. And of course, it has also off-site impacts. Siltation of dams, reservoirs are a major issue, and of course, flooding downstream. Some of the visible land degradation impact, as you can see, this is a very recent picture. Some of them are in 2020, but many of them are in 2012. Still, the fertile lands of the highlands of Ethiopia, which provides water downstream, is affected with this kind of land degradation, mainly sheet and gully erosion. And that has an impact on land productivity in general, but also it has transponder implication. I'm sure many of you are aware of this picture, that it affects Sinnar, it affects Rosaire, and Sudan, of course, invests millions of dollars every year on dredging the canals and the dam itself, the silt that's coming from Ethiopia. And of course, Sudan is also affected by flooding. Although this data is very old, when we think of siltation downstream from the Ethiopian highlands, sediments coming from Ethiopian Aswan Dam is not also free. Probably now the picture is totally different. Well, when we see on the left side of the picture, as you can see it here, you could see a kind of mud kind of flow in the rivers and the streams, which actually forms the delta of the Nile Basin. But when you see the slides on my right side, these are the type of flows, sediment flows in the degraded part of Ethiopia or the Eastern Nile Basin in the north, northeastern part. And unless we address land degradation, this is the kind of flow that comes to the deltas of Nile Delta, but also Sudan and etc. So this is very important. Unless you address the land degradation issue in the Ethiopian highlands, it's not only the Ethiopian people will be affected, but also the whole Eastern Nile countries and populations in general. Some of the causes of land degradation, focusing on Upper Eastern Nile, one is rugged topography, but also steep slope cultivation without proper management. As you can see on the right side, I have the slope map of Ethiopia, and the far right side, I have the crop cover. As you can see, the steep slopes, the crop cultivation is mainly on steep slope, on the highland parts of the country. So in national level, 27% of the land mass is above 50%, and 33% of the crop land is on slopes above 15%, as you can see it here. When it comes to the Upper Eastern Nile, 41% of the land mass is above 15% slope, all red and yellow, and about 37% of the crop land is on slopes above 15% again. So as you can see, and what worries me is the crop land in general is managed poorly in terms of sustainable land management. The other major cause is land use conversion, unregulated land use, land cover change. Forest lands, wood, wetlands are converted to cultivate lands, and settlement irrespective of the slope classes. Here I show you the big map of land use, land cover in 1986 and 2016, the Upper Eastern Line part. And as you see, at national level, cultivated land increased by 40% within this 4 decades. Forest and woodland decreased by 20 and 27% respectively. Wetlands and Afro-alpine areas decreased by 41 and 10%. So we are actually losing the source of water and the recharge. Settlement is increased by 230%. That shows you population growth a major challenge and burden. And of course, degraded land increased by 16%. Down to the Upper Eastern Nile basin level, you could see forest land increased by 4%. There is quite a lot of afforestation going on by the Ethiopian government. But woodland and wetlands decreased by 37 and 28% respectively. And that worries because of the conversion of woodlands to large commercial farms, but wetlands by small-scale, smallholder farmers. Cultivated land and settlement increased by 37% and 28%, and degraded land increased by 54%. So that should be a major worry for Eastern Nile countries. The third cause is fragmented land use and poor land management. I said it already. As you can see in this picture, the highlands of Ethiopia in the Upper Eastern Nile are dissected and fragmented with this kind of land management, totally small pieces, and of course, very poor livestock management, dominantly free grazing. This affects, of course, the ecosystem and land degradation. Rainfall, particularly uneven distribution, both temporal and spatial, as you can see on the map. And the Eastern Nile part of the country got the largest rainfall, but it is concentrated in 4 months: June, July, August, September. And of course, it results in saturation and runoff, cause heavy erosion and water on exposed soils, flooding and siltation downstream, as you can see it here. From our assessment, we we found out nearly on the average 36% of the sediment ended up in the rivers, reservoirs, and dams. The other cause, major cause, is the homestead domestic energy source. Although this figure is a little bit old, about 95% of the domestic energy source is biomass energy. That is charcoal, crop residue, cow dung. As you can see, the cow dung cakes already are used for household energy source. That's why actually Ethiopia is embarking on building the Grand Renaissance Dam, at least to supply energy at household level. And this kind of biomass-based energy use for domestic use is actually impacting deforestation, impacting soil fertility mining, and net land degradation in general. Of course, unchecked population growth and the kind of economy we have where 80% of the population dependent on subsistence agriculture, it actually has a burden on the land itself. So these are some of the causes, very briefly. And our experience on sustainable land management, Ethiopia actually started modern sustainable land management in 1975, mainly on soil and water conservation at that time, and afforestation. But later on, in the 80s, it was changed into integrated watershed management. Over the last 43 years, I have this data up to 2016. Ethiopia conserved about 7.7 million hectares. As you can see, the green on the left side, these are the physical structures that we were able to map using different techniques. Which is 23% of the areas that requires conservation. And luckily, about 73% of this is within the upper Eastern Nile basin. And I think that shows you Ethiopia is actually investing a lot in managing the upper Eastern Nile basin, a lot, for the benefit of its people, but again, for the benefit of Sudan and Egypt, other countries, South Sudan also. The remaining areas that require soil conservation is about 26 million hectares, which is the red, as you can see. When we zoom into the upper Eastern Nile basin, about 5.6 million hectares covered, 28% that require soil conservation. But still, as you can see in the bottom slide, the red requires about 40 million hectares requires soil and water conservation intervention. Ethiopia, there are a number of initiatives in Ethiopia, SLP1, SLP2, RLP, whatever you call it. And as you can see in the picture, those different colors, dots are project sites supported by World Bank, KfW, and others. And they cover about an area of 2.1 million hectares. And interestingly, about 1.5 million hectares is in Upper Eastern Nile basin. 71% of these big initiatives are still in the Upper Eastern Nile basin, as you can see. Again, this also shows you Ethiopia's investment on land management in Upper Eastern Nile basin. There is also community mobilization for integrated watershed management. Every year, communities contribute free labor up to 60 days, as you can see it. Poor farmers, subsistence farmers are digging and working on their land to conserve the degraded landscape. The other initiative in Ethiopia is the Green Legacy Initiative, which is led by our Prime Minister, as you can see it here, busy planting. It mobilizes urban and rural communities in organizing tree planting. It started in 2019 and planned to plant about 20 billion seedlings in 4 years. In 2019, they planned, the report shows about 3.7 billion seedlings. In 2020, last year, about 5.2 billion seedlings planted and achieved. And this year, we are working to achieve about 6 billion seedlings. We have still a challenge of sustainability, and I think the responsible task force are trying to address that issue. Over the years, Ethiopia planted billions of seedlings. The current vegetation cover in general covers about 32 million hectares, and tree cover shows an increasing trend from our analysis. Some of the impacts based on our case study, soil erosion reduced in areas where conservation is managed well, peak runoff and flooding avoided, base flow of streams increased, and of course, plant biomass and increased productivity. And we have seen livelihood of communities improved in general. And of course, reduced siltation downstream. If I may show, this is one of our case study sites. This site was started in 2012. After almost 1 year, you could see, and after 3-4 years, that degraded landscape is converted into this kind of productive landscape. So the message is it is possible to address land degradation everywhere in Africa. This is another example. This is one of our monitoring sites, starting from 1984 when we start, 88, 2006, 2010. As you can see, the landscape is changed, configured, and we have seen that in doing so, the vegetation is covered, the land is conserved. But if you see on the top side of on the right side, the runoff rainfall coefficient remains parallel. So in the highlands where the temperature is cool, land management will not actually reduce runoff that's going down. On the lower side, you could see soil erosion can be reduced tremendously. This is again another result where the landscape is changed, and of course, crop productivity improved, soil is conserved. And very recently, we also introduced a system where we can also change homesteads into this kind of horticultural production areas to improve livelihood, but also to enhance and capacitate women and household nutrition. And we have seen very successful results on this one. Some of the lessons from Ethiopia, and I think what we learned is possible to address land degradation, improve environmental quality, and ecosystem services, in this case, water and food, and improve livelihoods, a possibility. We have practically tested an improved approach on participatory integrated watershed management and sustainability. We have the guideline. I think this guideline can be customized to other parts of Africa also. Recognition of the need for sustainability and the guideline, as you can see it here, we have even a software, which we'll be more than happy to share it with our friends in the Nile Basin countries. We developed, my center, we developed it. Policy support for SLM. Ethiopia has Ethiopian Sustainable Investment Framework for Sustainable Land Management. We have a number of environmental policies and others. Although some of the policies we have difficulty on implementation, but there is a good support there. Investment is very important. So SLM focused projects and programs are there. Focused capacity development on SLM and knowledge management is an issue. Very recently, through World Bank, we developed a knowledge management system for SLM. Again, this system can be also customized for other countries, and we'll be more than happy to support, and commitment of leaders for SLM. More is still needed, but this kind of commitment, like you see our Prime Minister planting trees here, everywhere in the country and mobilizing the communities, which I really appreciate. But as I say, still more is needed. And now, the final slide, how then the Nile Basin Initiative could support integrated watershed management, or SLM. Anybody should invest on focused awareness creation about the value of keeping the basin healthy. I think that is very, very important. I'm always worried that people in downstream countries, they always focus on sharing the result of the ecosystem service, water, but not securing and protecting the source of the water. Unless we protect and manage the source of the water, which actually provides 86%, sooner or later, the impact will be visible. So a greater awareness creation is very important so that people will focus on protecting the source. Protecting the Upper Eastern Nile Basin is not only responsibility of the Ethiopian government. As I try to show you by facts and figures, the government and the people are investing on Upper Eastern Nile. They will, of course, benefit, but it is not only the Ethiopian people and government will benefit, but Sudan, South Sudan, and Egypt. So I think downstream countries should also contribute to add this landscape management as part of payment for ecosystem services. NBDF should have a long-term project support on integrated watershed management in each country. I strongly recommend, I know you had a very nice fast-track program in the past, but that seems phased out. I want you to initiate that, but it should be long-term. Watershed management is not 2 years or 3 years. I would go for 3 phases, each 5 years in each country, building on current best practices and experiences of each country, but also NBI, adapted to specificity of each country, because I think one jacket fits all cannot work. There are different adjustments to be made. There are excellent experiences. And I also strongly recommend in this project an inbuilt and focused capacity building, both institutional, human resource on technical level, but also building capacity of communities and increasing strong rural-urban linkage. And country-to-country relation should be part of the long-term project support by NBI in 3 phases in 5 years. And I hope and I wish NBI will address this issue. This is what I want to forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor, for the most enlightening presentation. And we shall come back later on to your last slide on what more can NBI do to support some of these initiatives at country level. But I want to move immediately now and invite Elias Paluku Tawahasima. Please, Elias, you have 10 minutes to give us the case for Congo. The floor is yours. Share your screen. And the engineer Muhammad Suleiman, we see you. I will invite you at some stage to also share the experience of a downstream country in terms of impacts of sediment flowing from the upstream catchments. You are welcome. Elias Paluku, can you hear me? Elias, can you unmute your mic?
Yes, I've unmuted it.
Go ahead with your presentation. Shall we run it from this side? I think we run it from this side and then you talk.
Okay, nice. You can go on.
Okay, please. Elias, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you.
Slightly faster.
Okay, dear panelists and participants, good afternoon. And I want to share with you the topic from DR Congo, which is about protecting highlands soil against erosion in Congolese Nile Basin, the case of Beni and Lubero territories, North Kivu. Please, I'm called Elias Paloku Tahawasima, and then we can go. Hello, another slide. Okay, our outline is presented like this. We'll speak about the Congolese Nile Basin presentation, the highlands, in which we speak about methodology also, erosions in the highlands of the market gardening region, the causes of erosion in the highlands of Beni and Lubero, the consequences due to erosions in the highlands of Beni and Lubero. Then we go on with the recommendations by ending by conclusion. Another slide. Okay, another slide, please.
Okay. Are you seeing?
Yes, yes. The Congolese Nile Basin covers an area of nearly 26,000 kilometers square over 6 territories, 3 of which are in North Kivu province, Rutshuru, Lubero, and Beni, and 3 in Ituri province, Irumu, Jugu, and Mahagi. In this mountainous region with the highest population density in the country, 350 inhabitants by kilometer square, several tribes are dedicated to agriculture, breeding, and fishing on the lakes Albert and Edward. The area occupies 1% of the Congolese territory, but inhabited by more than 10% of the population of the DR Congo. The region has got a very good fauna and flora. Lakes Albert and Edward, united by the Semlik River, beside the mountain of Rwenzori, which is the highest in DRC. This region, located along the Ugandan and Rwandan borders, possesses numerous mineral resources: gold, diamond, coltan, wolframite, cassiterite, precious woods, and commercial agricultural products such as coffee, cocoa, vanilla, and others that are easily found there. And if you can see on the map, that small area which is in blue color, that is the part which represents the Congolese Nile Basin. It is a small part, but it possesses a lot of population, and it is very important for the DRC, even for the Nile Basin. We can pass. Okay, another slide.
See the next slide?
Yeah, the next. Okay.
See the next slide?
Yeah. That and if we can see, these are the 2 territories we are speaking about. This yellow, Kale, Lubero, and the following, which is Beni. Then our study is concerning these two territories, and you can see these territories, it is the mainly in which we did our field trips, so that we could get things which are very, very recent. We want to verify what is passing in these two territories. That's why we are presenting you photos and even images which are very recent about the highlands of Beni and Lubero. Can pass to another slide. Please, another slide. Another slide, please. Okay, thank you. And then one want to speak about the characteristics of the highlands of Beni and Lubero territories. The highlands of Beni and Lubero are severe due to the lack of soil protection, exploited by a galloping population for decades without rest. The highlands of the area are overcrowding, dominated by many hills and mountains, several valleys, etc. The area is very favorable to agriculture and livestock. It is also called a market garden area because vegetables and other market garden products are cultivated in abundance in such as onion, garlic, cauliflower, cabbage, wheat, leek, potatoes, beans, corn, carrots, etc. It is a favorable climate for the breeding of cattle, goats, and poultry. That's why it is a very important meal in the region, and that's why we focused on this region to study together, so that we can share what is passing in this region. And then, when we can see these characteristics, this region shows that there are the highest villages of DRC in this region, and it is a region which contains the highest Congo-Nile range. That's why we can see the village like Kipese, Masereka, Ngitse, Luotu, Kyondo, Luveve, which are located to a very high altitude, 2,583 meters, and you can see they are very high in the region. In all the DRC, these are the places which are inhabited, which are very high in the region of DRC. Then, according to Watershed, the region is constituting the highest Congo-Nile range, which supplies the Lake of Edward and the River Semuliki by some rivers, such as Tarihia North, Tarihia South, and we can have Karuruma, Tako, Luveve, and other rivers. And if you can see these different photos, they show the landscape of the highlands of Beni and Lubero. And you can see the highlands are dominated by mountains and hills. And you can see these are the highlands of those that region. Okay, you can pass to another. And if we reach this, we can speak then about the erosions in the highlands of the market gardening region. Really, the erosions are the real fact in the region, because during the rain period, all the roads are buoyed and others are cut by erosion. During the rain, the fertile soil, without any protective mechanism, flows with water into rivers. The anti-erosion hedges, which were popularized in the region at least 30 years ago, have already been abandoned by young population on the pretext that the hedges reduce the field and promote the development of rodents in the field. And you can see on these different photos, those are erosions which are caused by rain, which are really in the region. And you can see the roads, how they are just when it rains. All things are bad just when it rains. You can see the road. It is difficult to communicate by roads just when it has rained because of erosions or in highlands. All good soil comes and occupy all the roads, and the road become muddy and there is no way. And the causes of erosion in the highlands of Benue, then the causes of erosions in the region are multiple. In particular, the popular pressure, which leads to overexploitation of the soil. It's a man who accelerates the process of erosion in his environment. This idea is corroborated by Rivens and his collaborators, who say that soil erosion is a natural process accelerated by human activities. Added to this is the lack of soil protection policy with anti-erosion hedges and other soil protection techniques. The lack of or insufficiency of environmental education on the part of population. The topographical factors of the environment, because the market garden area has too many slopes and like that. And this leads to many—
Elias, let us be faster. Thank you.
And this leads to many consequences in the region. That's why we can find the soil erosion in the highland are gradually leading us to incalculable consequences, not only in the region, but also in the daily course of the waters of the Nile, of the Congolese Nile Basin, the Uganda, South Sudan, till Egypt. The soil fertility, because the soil tends to towards desertification. The increase of quantity of water in the sources as stipulated by the United Nations Environmental Program, which said that at the same time, as I can quote them, at the same time, several regions of the DR Congo are likely to face physical water shortages in the near future. Paradoxically, among them are crucial recharge areas such as the Congo-Nile Range in eastern Congo, DR Congo. New vulnerable areas include Beni and Butembo, where rising demand from an already dense and strongly growing population weigh on hydrous resources. In any case, without urgent protection measures for the highland soil, the Nile will dry up one day, or at least it will decrease by a large amount of its waters, with many negative consequences on the riparian people. Several cases of the most recent floods and erosion date from Sunday, March 7, 2021, in the morning, where I was really a witness. Other consequences are resulted from the first, such as the land conflict, because people are no longer satisfied with the minimum production of very small fields, which are victims of region, the putting in protected areas of Virunga National Park, the banditries, kidnapping, the delinquency, the enrollment of children in militia and armed group. That's why ethnic aggression Vundavu Kanyan, director of Fondation Amis des Animaux. You can see him on the photo. He says that when erosion persists in a place, it will create a lack of grass, and this will sooner or later lead to the desertification of the soil. This will make breeding very impossible in our highlands environment. This will more impoverish the population who live on agriculture and livestock. Hence, according to him, let us act when there is still time. Then you can see even images. These are recent. It is a flood which up the last day when I speak about the 7th of March. That's why we give some recommendation. We suggest a need for permanent collaboration between the Congo, the Congolese peasant and the Egyptians and Sudanese who benefit from this water. The capacity building in the management of endangered lands for rational and sustainable use of lands. The experience exchange visits between residents of the Nile Basin, a program supported by donors of the, for the collaborative planting of a hedge, erosion hedge in all, in all fields of the highlands of the DRC to promote anti-erosion hedges, for they have the power to effectively reduce the force of rainwater which could carry the soil into the valley, but also they serve our animals for breeding, to create gentle slopes in the fields to decrease the force and the speed of runoff. Also, other recommendations, they are resulted from this is, and we can use a technique for really let population participate to our work. For example, the free consent informed prerequisite technique in involving peasants in the search of solutions. The use of this technique helps the population in raising their awareness about the problem of erosion in the region. The solutions are to be implemented by the farmers themselves, of course, supervised by technicians, agronomists, and others, and financially supported by the states and development organization. And you can see these techniques containing four points: the consent, the free, informed, prerequisite. That shows that population must take really the engagement to say yes or no to one project of really working in their area, so that they can be involved in that project. That decision must be free. It mustn't be really posted by another person. They must take a decision willingly after being informed about the goodness of the project, and they must be informed before so that they can take a decision. Then, as a conclusion, it's time to change our practices and management towards our lands to hope for sustainable profitability, which must serve not only the present generations, but also the children of our children, because the descendants will judge us for what we do now. Hence, we must act collaboratively in protecting highlands of our Nile Basin. What must involve close collaboration or cooperation between all the countries benefiting from the water in the area to promote the common interest. The sharing of experience between Egypt, Sudan, and the DR Congo to maintain the water in the Congolese Nile Basin or better to increase the quantity of this water. Thank you very much, dear listeners, dear panelists, and dear participants. This is what I had to share with you about DRC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elias. Indeed, your message is very, very clear. We are sorry we had to rush you. We're trying to leave enough time for discussions, but the message is clear. The portion of the DRC in the Nile Basin may be small, but it is very important. The Rwenzori is one of the water towers of the Nile Basin. And that mountain, together with Elgon, is what gives the name of the White Nile in South Sudan and Sudan, Bahar el Jebel, the river of the mountains. It's because of the mountains, Rwenzori, where those big rivers start. Let me at this point invite Madam Rashid Mwasiti, who is from NELSAP CU, to tell us what NELSAP is doing in the areas of the Nile Equatorial Lakes region where DRC Congo also falls. Mwasiti, the floor is yours and you have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can you see my screen?
We see it. Put in full mode.
Yeah, it is. Yeah? Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope it is afternoon for everyone. Yeah, so today I'll just go quickly. I will present the role of NELSAP CU with regard to watershed management in the Nile Equatorial Lake region and what has been done so far with regard to it, to catchment or sub-catchment protection. So I'll present an overview on the watershed management projects under different river basin management PMUs, including Mala, Siomalaba, Malakisi, Kagera, and the Lift 2 project. So NELSAP role is to facilitate the Nile Equatorial Lakes countries to identify and prepare in-country and transboundary watershed management projects with the aim to contribute to reverse of environmental degradation and at the same time to ensure improve the water quality and livelihood. So in 2012, NELSAP concluded some feasibility studies for integrated watershed management programs in the 3 RBMs. Kagera RBMs, which includes the countries of Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, and Mala RBMs, which includes the country of Tanzania and Kenya, the Siomalaba Malakisi RBM, which include the countries of Uganda and Kenya. Okay, so this one here you see from my presentation on the right side. This one here is just an example of the feasibility studies which was conducted by NELSAP for integrated watershed management in the basin. Okay, and also since 2012, under the support of the World Bank, under the ENCO project, and also from the support from the African Development Bank under the African Water Facility and NEPA DPPF, NELSAP has been preparing multipurpose water resources development infrastructure projects mainly for irrigation, hydropower generation, fisheries, and water supply components. But also these multipurpose projects, all of them, they include watershed management components, all of them. So also between 2013 and 2015, under the ENCO project, under the 3 RBMs, as I mentioned before, NELSAP prepared catchment, or sometimes we call sub-catchment management plans for selected catchment under those 3 RBMs. But also in between 2018 and 2019, of the catchment of watershed management in the basin, and decided to prepare catchment management manual or guideline to enhance the know-how of the countries in fundamental aspects related to watershed management. because all activities that support watershed management need to be integrated in one document, and that is the catchment, sub-catchment management. So all countries has been preparing the plans by its own way. NELSAP has been preparing the plans by its own way. So NELSAP decided to use in-house capacity to prepare the guideline step by step on how to prepare catchment management plans, because our catchments really need the plans. As you can see from the picture here, miscellaneous activities in the catchment, including man-made and natural, which leads to environmental degradation or catchment degradation. So this one here is the catchment management planning manual, which was prepared by NELSAP in 2018-2019. So just to mention, as I said before, our role, NELSAP role, is to identify and prepare some catchment management plans of the critical sub-catchment or critical catchment that are vulnerable to degradation, but also has been preparing some multi-purpose project, which also include watershed management plans. So for Mara River Basin management, these are some of the, catchment or sub-catchment management plans that were prepared by NELSAP. In number, they are 8. But based on the time, I don't think it is necessary maybe to read on them, but this map here on the right side show the coverage of some CMPs, the catchment management plans, in some in Kenya and some in Tanzania. But in total for the Mara River Basin, they are 8 in the countries of Kenya and Tanzania. And below here are the number of benefits, for example, catchment size, coverage, and the number of beneficiaries who will benefit from the catchment or sub-catchment management plans, and the implementation cost which is needed for the countries to implement the plans is here. These are the catchment or sub-catchment management plans which were prepared under the CO Malaba Malakis River Basin Management PIUs. They are 4. And down here are the benefits. But fortunately for the CO Malaba Malakisi, the coverage of the sub-catchment or catchment management plans are good. As you can see from the map in the right side, it covers up from the river sources up to the middle part of the area. Some, as you can see from the table here, some of the plans are shared between Kenya and Uganda, and some of them are in country, for example, Middle Malakis, but most of them are shared between these 2 countries. But also, as I mentioned before, for example, here you can see Siosango Dam. Above the Siosango Dam, there is also a sub-catchment or catchment management plan, which will be implemented together when the dam will be in operation. For Kagera River Basin Management, PMU, we have like 6 catchment or sub-catchment management plans, as you can see from the map here. Some of them, the map is showing coverage of some of the scamps. Some of them, for example, the Kagera Basin-wide Integrated Watershed Management Program was shared between all 4 countries of Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi, with large number of catchment size, beneficiaries, and of course, the project cost is a bit high. But some of them are in country. We have one for Tanzania, 1 for Burundi, 2 for Rwanda, and 1 for Uganda, with benefits, as you can see from the table, from the last column. But for Muvumba and Akanyalu, these plans were identified by NELSAP together with the government of Rwanda, but the studies were completed by the government of Rwanda. They managed to secure a fund and they completed the studies for these two, Akanyalu and Muvumba. But for the rest, NERSAP secured funds from different sources, from World Bank, and prepared the scamps. This one is for the LEAF 2 project. LEAF 2 is Lake Edward and Albert Integrated Fisheries Project, which is shared between Uganda and the DRC. And so far, we have 2 catchment management plans completed, including Kusi and Muzizi. The other one, Semriki, which is shared between Uganda and the DRC, is still ongoing. And this has the maps here at the right side, and down here you can see the maps, which is showing the coverage of the catchments for LEAF 2 projects. That is all, but I want to give some points to note. No investment project can be sustainable either in the Nile or in the entire Nile Basin countries without watershed management in the upstream area of that particular multipurpose dam or multipurpose project. Because the lifespan, for example, the lifespan of multipurpose project or a dam, it is completely depending on watershed management in the upstream area of that particular point. For example, the lifespan of Borenga Dam in the Mara Basin, in the downstream part of the Mara catchment in Tanzania, is completely dependent on the watershed management in the upstream area in Kenya. If watershed management will not be done in Kenya, it means the lifespan of Borenga Dam, when it will start operation, it will be decreased. So collaboration between these 2 countries is necessary, though the Borenga Dam is national, completely in Tanzania, and it will benefit Tanzanians, but it has a transboundary nature. It needs cooperation between the 2 countries to make sure the dam is sustainable. And of course, the role of NERSAP-CU is to identify and prepare a catchment management plan of the strategic watersheds in the basin, and help the countries, of course, in resource mobilizations to implement the plans. But it is completely the responsibilities of the country to implement the plan. Or maybe if the plan is transboundary, and the country decided to maybe to give a role to NERSAP-CU to implement on their behalf, it can be done like that as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you indeed, Mwasiti, for that enlightening presentation. We have not managed to get a presentation from our colleagues in Entro, but they have also they have made similar interventions in terms of watershed management. Thank you so much. We shall stay with us. We have some questions for you. But let me now at this moment invite Engineer Mohammed Suleimani to make the presentation from Sudan. Sudan is downstream of the headwaters and suffers from the sediment that flows to it. Suleiman, please go ahead. If you need us to run the slides from our side, we can do so. Advise us how you would like to make your presentation. Engineer Suleiman, can you unmute your mic and speak to us? We seem not to get. Suleiman, your microphone is not on. As he prepares himself, let me open the floor for questions and answers. A number of questions have been posted in the chat, and I will invite our presenters to respond to them. Mr. Kabalisa, there was a question to you from Stephen Emor. How are the local communities adopting these practices for woodland husbandry? have there been any challenges in terms of trying to get the communities to adopt these practices? Mr. Kabalisa.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Asa. Well, the communities, they have been involved in adopting some of these best practice. Of course, some challenges are related to the cost associated with the making some of these terrace. But in terms of infrastructure, the issue of funds, some of these infrastructure are quite heavy, they are costing. Farmers have been supported in terms of looking at how they can do it. But what we found was a really good adoption of some of this best practice, like the grass, some of the practice which are not very costly, they are well adopted. They used to be actually in the area. It's not something which is completely new. And some of the practices which are quite heavy, the government is supporting them with a little bit of subsidy, and they carry out the work. So the adoption for simple technology is very easy, and those which are quite expensive, the government and the also partners, NGOs, they come to support with the little bit of subsidy, and then they carry out the work. Like those terracing, sometimes they are quite expensive, and the farmers cannot do it, so there are that intervention from outside supporters, from the government or from other partners.
Thank you, Mr. Kabalisa. Professor Gete, Mr. Mere Tekle commented, I don't know if you want to respond to that comment, that we should not stop at valuing water. To value water, we need to value ecosystems and watersheds. But also there was a question from Ubalem, and in your presentation, you mentioned the issue of sustainability. And Ubalem is asking what percentage of those areas that were rehabilitated have relapsed back and gone to being degraded. Can you quickly respond to those two?
Thank you, Mr. Facilitator. Well, I think with regard to the comment by Amara, valuing the source, I think that's what I'm referring at. My worry, I'm as an environmentalist and working on land management for a long time, and see the impact of land degradation, and see also the rainfall distribution and the amount of rainfall that is reduced in degraded landscape as compared to intact landscapes. I really worry in the long run, unless you manage and protect the source of the water, the upper landscapes, sooner or later, you will see the impact, the negative impact downstream. So we need to value the source, and we need to jointly manage the source, so that we will have better ecosystem services, in this case water. And my worry is particularly the downstream countries always focus on the end result, but not protecting and managing the source jointly. So I think that's an important comment, and I ask NBDF also to address this issue. With regard to Dr. Uvalem's question, what % of the watersheds are sustainable? That is, what we did was, in Ethiopia, as I said, since 1975, modern land management started, and Ethiopia invested billions of dollars through projects, but also through community mobilization for the last many years, more than 4.5 decades. But the results from our mapping in 2016, the finding we have is not comparable to the investment. That shows that there is a huge problem of sustainability of investments in watershed management. So I think this was communicated to the government. Even on the tree planting campaign, this Green Legacy, we also noticed that the sustainability and survival rate of seedling is a major issue. So to address this issue, the first thing is we want to know what is the status, that we know. The second thing is how can we ensure sustainability? So led by my center, we developed a guideline for sustainability, including a software associated to that. And we are training people to work on that. And that guideline and software can be also available for our sister countries in East Africa. The second measure we took was we established a learning landscape to show how you can actually sustain watershed investments on watershed management. We have established 6 learning landscapes. We already handed over these watersheds to the community. Out of 6, 5 of them are fully sustainable and developed, and they are being used now as a learning site. We are still investigating the reason behind one of the landscape why it is not sustainable. So in general, I think while we have to invest on watershed management, we have to equally invest on how to make watersheds sustainable. And it's very important. The key to make watershed investment sustainable is make sure the communities and local authorities own the process starting from the very beginning. And second, make sure your investment is economically attractive to the farmer. We did that in our learning landscapes, and it is sustainable. Thank you very much.
Very much, Professor Gete. Still related to what you have been trying to respond to, and I want to make this open to all the panelists, but also the participants. If you want to give us a response to this next issue, you may raise your hand and we shall pick you. And the question is from Mubalem, and he's saying, if downstream countries are benefiting from expensive investments in watershed management in the upstream areas, what incentives can we give them so that these downstream countries also co-invest in these upstream activities from which they benefit? Let me make it open to any panelists to try and respond to this question from Mubalem. Who would like to go?
Shall I start on this?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think from my presentation, you have seen that 73% of the major investments, according to our finding in our map, on sustainable land management is actually in Upper Eastern Nile in Ethiopia. So Ethiopia, actually through projects, but also through community mobilization, they are investing their resource and time heavily on protecting the source of the Nile. And of course, as you can see, 86% of the water flows downstream. Sudan and Egypt are the major beneficiaries of this water. And my suggestion is they have to contribute and share the cost of investing and managing the upstream and the source of the water through payment for ecosystem service in general.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, there was a participant who raised the hand, Mary Mangoe. Let's give you the opportunity to ask your question. Unmute your mic and speak. Helen Mangoe. We don't have Helen Mangoe. But there were also questions to Mwasiti. Mwasiti, are you still there? We seem to have lost Mwasiti. As a way of responding to some of those questions, I think there was a question from Helen as to which government institution those catchment management plans are handed to. The national institution that the NBI works with is the Ministry of Water through the Office of the TAC. But I am aware that in the preparation of those catchment management plans, all relevant sector institutions are involved. So it's a cross-sectoral activity, but the NBI hands over these plans and indeed all the projects which are prepared to the Ministry of Water, and then the Ministry of Water then at national level liaises with the other sectors, either to incorporate them within their sector investment plans or to implement them. There was also a question from Wubalem on mode of implementation of some of the investment projects which are identified watershed management activities. I know for a fact that many of them have been incorporated, and Mwasiti gave examples where, for example, for Rwanda, the activity was initiated by NELSAP and later on, Rwanda took it on. So that is almost a standard mode that the countries are involved, and at some stage, these projects are mainstreamed into national programming, and the countries may eventually borrow from them at national level and implement them. I think there was also a similar experience with the Entro watershed, that the countries eventually took over those projects and implemented them. Colleagues, we are running out of time, so I want to move. I know we have a lot of questions, but I want us to move to the final activity for our webinar, which is our panel discussion. And I think we have already started brainstorming on this final panel question. Our presentations have been rich, and they have highlighted the critical importance of watershed management in transboundary water management context. That good watershed management is important to ensure the continued flow of water and the continued flow of goods and services. And therefore, it is important for this purpose that it is given high importance and priority at NBI level. To conclude, we are going to have this panel discussion, and the question to the panelists is, what additional role can the NBI play, additional to what you have heard from the presentation of Mwasiti, in promoting sustainable land management in critical watersheds of the Nile Basin? Let me invite Mr. Vincent Paul Kabalisa to start, and then I will invite the next panelist also. Mr. Kabalisa, please.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Azza. I really think the Nile Basin Initiative has a big role to play in making sure that some of these best practices are really cross-shared between Nile countries. As you are playing a central role in terms of coordinating basin-wide, I think it's the one which you are doing, even organizing this kind of forum is very important, and really that's a good step towards the sharing the information, maybe organizing also some study tour, or bringing the experts from downstream, upstream to downstream. I mean, to share the experience, to see what we are doing really, especially upstream area. Our farmers, if you have listened to all our presentation, farmers from Ethiopia, farmers from our countries, Rwanda, Congo, those countries which are upstream, they are working hard to make sure the soil is retained, and also the catchment are protected. So it's important that Nile Basin help to cross sea. We can take some of the people from downstream, especially when we are talking now the payment for ecosystem service, to come and appreciate the efforts being carried out by upstream farmers. That will be a good in terms of good approach, which will be help to share, to understand, to appreciate really what people are doing upstream. And then, of course, later on, we will see how you can help us to design some of the transboundary projects. The road NERSAP is doing, the road Entro is doing, they need to be, upscaled and have more projects in terms of investment. There are issues of watershed, there are issues of water security which we are facing, afforestation, deforestation. So all those efforts, we are expecting to see a Nile Basin really promoting them and upscaling really all those investments so that people, some of the projects, of course, they are transboundary. So that aspect of transboundary is something which we expect you, Nile Basin, to help us to make sure we have really many projects in the region, in the basin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kabalisa. Professor Gete, your thoughts on this?
Can you repeat your question, please?
It is actually what we had already started discussing. What greater role can NBI play in promoting sustainable land management in critical watersheds of the Nile Basin?
Well, I think I already put as my concluding remark. We often think water comes from the dams and from the tap, as it was said by Amara also. Actually, water comes from the catchment. And if we are not managing the catchment well, after some time, definitely the water will not come. So either you will end up with storing sediment and silt, or totally no water at all. And I think the Nile Basin is one of the areas seriously affected by land degradation, mainly physical degradation, in this case, soil erosion. Of course, there is also a serious problem of chemical degradation in terms of soil acidity. And downstream, also salinity is a major problem. If this is a major problem, and not only that, this also affects livelihood in terms of reduced agricultural productivity, because nearly 80% of the population in the basin is dependent on subsistence agriculture, except some large farms in Sudan and Egypt. So it is linked to the environment, it is environment quality, it is also linked to livelihood of the population. So I think if this is the case, addressing land degradation in upstream areas and even downstream area should be the major focus of the Nile Basin Initiative. And in that, my suggestion is, I suggest you to focus on two major issues. One, awareness creation. Very focused awareness creation through study tours at all levels, at policymaker level, at expert level, at scientist level, and at community level. Community representatives should go back and forth, up and down, see the challenge of land degradation and how that land degradation will actually affect the only resource, water, that connects us. And I think this is very, very important. And I want you to really design a creative system in creating strong awareness creation through different mechanisms. We can help on that. That's one. So they understand that they should not always worry about watershed, but they should worry about protecting and managing the source jointly. Second, for me, is I I have been, remotely involved in the fast track projects. One of the fast track projects was watershed management. But I'm not sure whether that is going on right now. So my suggestion is NBI should really prepare a project proposal and mobilize resources in supporting watershed management in upstream areas. But of course, when we think of land degradation, we should not also forget the chemical degradation, especially salinity in downstream countries. So, as I say, the watershed management context will be, contextualized to the specificities of the countries, but we need to have a long-term watershed management program. And when we think of watershed management, we always, many of us, focus only on the biophysical aspect. But watershed management is also about socio-economic development. So we have to, there is quite excellent experience, as the speaker prior to me from Rwanda said, there are excellent experience in many countries, in Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Kenya. And I think assessing the experience, sharing the experience, and then building on that experience, I think come up a proper watershed management project. I would say with a minimum years, 15 years, 3 phases in each 5 year would be the best approach to go. And once again, I want to emphasize, for me, one of the most important focus should be watershed management of Nile Basin, should be watershed management, as it touches everything. And I suggest go and develop a long-term project proposal, involve the different countries, create awareness, create capacity, and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wubalem, if you are with us, I see your hand raised. We shall allow you to make your comment. But before you come in, I want to point out that next week, we will start the stream on transboundary water governance. One of the issues which comes to mind when we discuss this issue is the fact that we still don't have the appropriate framework to discuss this issue. We need a proper legal framework to be able, for countries to be able to cooperate on sharing the costs for the benefits that they are getting out of the resources. But Wubalem, you had a hand up, so we shall allow you to make your comment. Wubalem.
It's not.
We are not able to get you. I think your internet is very weak. Isaac Liabwell, if you are around, we can also allow you to comment. Isaac is a former TAC member from South Sudan. Wubalem, we are not able to get you. I think your internet connection is weak.
Thank you, Nicholas. I have shared a small thought on the idea of downstream investing on upstream watershed management. The feasible way for that one to happen is for the countries to agree on it as a transboundary project, and then they entrust it an appropriate NBI center to raise or to solicit funding and prepare it as a project for them, because we know our countries are difficult to advance money to other countries. Even it is difficult for them to invest on their own watershed. But we have a lot of well-wishers who want the Nile Basin countries and population to cooperate and benefit from the shared water resources. So let us agree on the watershed management project on hotspot upstream areas, have transboundary project, and we entrust our centers to solicit funds for us, and we go ahead to implement them. So if we raise our, we add our voice of approval, there will be already a good contribution, more than money, to allow such a watershed project in a hotspot upstream to be implemented.
Thank you very much, Isaac. That is a very practical contribution. I think also another practical possibility is for major infrastructure projects which are being developed. These days is the standard practice in the water sector, that if you are putting up an infrastructure, you need to have a component of interventions in the watershed, just to ensure that the investment is not lost. So I think at NBI level, it can also become a standard practice that any major infrastructure that is being developed through NBI, that we must have a component linked to it, to the upstream area, so that we link the downstream infrastructure development with upstream interventions to ensure the sustainability of that investment. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, you have been a good audience. I would like to bring this discussion to a close. I don't know if any of the panelists wants to make any final comment before we close, but you have been a very wonderful group of panelists and a good audience. Anybody would like to make a final comment, even a participant, we can allow you to talk. We can allow you to unmute yourself and make your comment before we close. Modathir, did you want to make any comment? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, yes. I think Modathir.
Yes. Just I get a feeling that the downstream countries were over-blamed, that they were focused only on water sharing. But maybe this is not true. And maybe we should focus more on cooperating together, building trust with each other, working with each other, instead of somehow blaming each other that we are focusing only on some specific areas. Just this is a quick comment. Thank you.
Modathir, and of course it is important to note, we need that framework under which we can formally engage and have the cooperation in sharing of costs, as well as sharing of these benefits. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Elias, you have your hand up. We'll give you the last opportunity to talk before we close. Elias, you have the floor. You may unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. I just say something about what we have done. Really, I thank you for the organization. Really, if you can see, these have been challenges and experiences. That's why I can want the NBI really to do some field trips so that you can know the reality which are in different countries of the Nile Basin. That can help that you have all data in the region, because if you as really the leader of the region, it can help just when you have the reality of every region. Second, you must put stress on the collaboration between countries, as you told us that next week we will participate to that really meeting. It will help if really countries are united, they share together, if they take the same decision about struggling on this issue or another one, or sharing experience, it can be very better for all the region. So it is better also to look for many donors who can implement, who can help people to implement some activities, or even to sustain the existing activities in the region. So when it is like you work like that, all the region will be sustained, and it may bring a good really result when activities are everywhere in the region and sustainable, sustained by the NBI. The result of the whole work can bring really a good result in some months or in some years. So we should work together, as it is said, one Nile, one family. As we are one family, we must work together so that we can have a good result in the region. If one country is attacked by a problem, we must see where that problem is coming from. If it continues like that, it can affect other countries as we are united. That's why I must say that thank you for the sharing like this. You should continue really in other ways, sharing with the countries in such a way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elias. And in fact, you are emphasizing the point which the professor made in his submission. One of his points was for NBI to play a greater role in awareness raising and facilitating exchange of knowledge and best practices. I think this is something we're going to capture in our report. And of course, the other thing which is coming out is that investing in watershed management is of critical importance and needs to be highlighted and elevated in importance in NBI's investment decision. Recall that the focus of this forum is rethinking regional investment, and we're saying we need to channel more funding towards watershed management to be able to sustain the benefits that we're enjoying from the common Nile water resources. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It has been a very, very pleasant afternoon, and we have had very rich sharing. Indeed, we have common challenges, but there are solutions which we can all learn from. And like how Elias has said, NBI will have to continue this. Shall explore further avenues to continue this exchange of knowledge, including what NBI did in the past, supporting country exchanges, having exchange visits between the countries. Thank you much. Have a good afternoon, and looking forward to seeing you next week. We still have interesting webinars next week. We have the stream starting on reservoir coordination. We had webinars this week on climate change, rainfall forecasting, drought forecasting, and one of the tools to help us to deal with the floods and droughts are reservoirs, if we can coordinate them. So please join these webinars next week on regional reservoir coordination, but also we are starting the stream on transboundary water governance, where we'll look at how we are faring in terms of having the appropriate framework for cooperating and for stakeholder inclusion. Thank you. Have a good afternoon, and looking forward to seeing you in the other webinars.